Hi, my name is John Cho. I'm the author of a middle grade novel called Troublemaker, which just came out. And it's about a Korean American 12-year-old named Jordan Park on the first night of the Los Angeles riots, trying in an ill-advised way to help his parents out that first night, and trying to get across Los Angeles on the worst night of his family's lives.
Our guest today is an actor who's been in a number of TV shows and films you may recognize, like Star Trek and Harold and Kumar, to name a few. But did you know that Korean-American actor John Cho is also a New York Times bestseller author? Hi, I'm Gemma, and welcome to the Red Carpet. I'm so excited to be talking to John about his latest novel, Troublemaker. Hi, John. Thank you for talking to us today.
Hey, hi. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Your book, Troublemaker, follows the story of a young boy during the events of the LA riots as he attempts to make amends with his father. In the book, there are many cultural aspects that your main character goes through that a lot of our viewers could relate with. Given your history, I'm sure the audience would be interested in hearing more. Can you tell us about the book?
Yeah, I guess it's a period piece, but it's very fresh in my mind. It's set on April 29th, 1992, the day the Rodney King verdict was read. And it had a lot of echoes to events that are happening right now. I started in 2020, so it seemed there's so many parallels to the George Floyd murder and the ensuing unrest. So, but anyway, Jordan comes home from school suspended for cheating, scared to tell his parents, but in fact his parents are home that day and not at their liquor store in South Central. And the father then decides to go to the store to board it up in case of trouble. He goes, they don't hear from him, and so Jordan becomes very, very scared that something bad might happen to his father. So without permission, he sneaks into his father's closet, takes a gun, his dad's gun, and puts it in his backpack, sneaks out of the house with the intent to deliver that gun to his father for protection that first night.
So I know you have written before, but this is your debut novel. Troublemaker was not the book you set out to write. Why did you choose to write about Jordan instead?
Well, I had a publishing deal, and I thought it was going to be something fun, something light. I started reading it in earnest around that age. Really, that was when I needed books so much, because we were moving around so much. I really, books were a place to escape and feel safe and good. And I'd always just thought it would be great to walk into a library. I imagined a 10-year-old, 12-year-old me walking into a library and seeing someone that looked like me on the cover, an experience I never had at that age. And so that was my intent. But as we were sort of batting around what the book might be, the pandemic hit and George Floyd was murdered. Anti-Asian violence was on the rise, and we were locked inside the house, and I was trying to figure out how to discuss all these things with my kids, and I think that was on my mind, and my mind drifted then to the very similar incident, as I said, of the 92 riots, and then imagined what that might have been like for a kid. And I think that was probably driven by the fact that, again, my kids were home watching all this stuff. So then the idea came to me, and I called my editor and said, I think I'd like to do something different. It felt very difficult to focus on something lighter at the time. I couldn't focus on the book. And I realized that maybe I better put all of that everything I was thinking about into the book instead.
Speaking of your own Korean identity, can you share your experience during the era portrayed in the book?
I was in college at Berkeley, and so I was watching it on TV like everyone else. And when it happened, then I called my parents to make sure everything that they weren't in Koreatown or in the city at the time. They weren't, and I asked if we knew anyone. We didn't know anyone directly involved, who's any merchants who were directly affected. So that was an exhale. So then it was just watching the news coverage, and I'm an Angelino, so I was very concerned. And then and then they moved up into Koreatown, and then you saw the men on the roofs with the rifles, and then I became very, very concerned that someone would fire a shot and there would be more shooting back and forth, and then we'd see a lot of people die. So that's what I recall at the time.
So this book was a very personal experience for you, a reflection of that.
Yeah, I mean, I was drawing upon some emotions. I mean, I certainly spent a lot of time thinking about those events. At the time, it seemed very close. It was really the first time in my life that I remember Korean Americans being a national news item, Well, there was Latasha Harlan's, the murder of Latasha Harlan, so I should say that, but it was very strange to follow the news and feel like the nation was watching our people. It was a very strange, unique time.
In your book, there was a reflection of today's society in which we had anti-Asian hate, police brutality, school shootings. How did you handle these topics responsibly?
Yeah, it was an ongoing discussion. How are we responsible? How to frame all these difficult subjects for middle grade readers. And the first thing I had to get over was, is it appropriate at all? And where I landed was, it was naive of me to think that it wasn't already on their minds or in front of their faces. And in fact, I felt like they needed some kind of outlet to think or discuss these things. As I said, in the author's note, my children had already been through active shooter drills at their school. So guns were strangely already a part of their consciousness. And as I said, they were home watching all this coverage of George Floyd's murder, and we were already dealing with anti-Asian violence on a personal level, in that we were calling our relatives, and so as we all are, still in 2022. So it was already on their minds. I just felt like we needed to deal with it responsibly and give them an outlet and a way to think about it. As adults, we needed to frame the discussion for them. So the first move was to get someone else to help me write this book, someone who had experience in that space, and that was Sarah Suk, my co-writer. And she's also Korean Canadian, but I felt that I needed an experienced hand, because there's so many things where I was like, how do we phrase this? How do we kind of couch this idea? How do we get to this idea but make it appropriate? So that was an ongoing thing. It just seemed like every chapter there were 10 things to discuss and work out. But we kept, all I can tell you is that was an area of concern that was ongoing.
I could tell. I thought that the topics were handled very sensitively here, and even though I'm older than the target audience, I thought it was handled very well.
Thank you. Thank you.
So one of the topics, obviously, is the violence against the Koreans in the book. What did you want to highlight here?
I guess the overall goal was to humanize everyone represented in the book. My memory of that that time, and I'll count it from Latasha Harlan's murder. If people don't know, Latasha Harlan's was a teenager who was shot and killed by Sunjadu, a Korean American shop owner, who thought Latasha was stealing a bottle of orange juice. It turned out she was not, but she was murdered. And then and that experience, that event, and the Rodney King beating, I thought was very callously shown on TV, nonstop. You know, I very much doubt that were Latasha Harlan's a white teenager, that they would show the murder, her murder, as often as they did on television, and it deadened people to the event itself. You know, the repetitive airing of that event. So the way it was framed was the way the LA riots were framed also through the media was a kind of Korean black conflict, when in fact it was a justice conflict. And I think at its core, and Koreans were sort of in the way. And so what I wanted to do with the book was first to paint a portrait of a Korean American family, because I said, who's the image that we most remember of Korean Americans from that time is the men on the rooftops. And I said, well, I wonder what that man's family is like, what his kids are like. So we wanted to humanize that man on the roof. And then, as you might have noticed in the book, I didn't show any scenes of rioters or looters or group scenes. I wanted every interaction that Jordan has to be a one-on-one interaction in order to humanize those people that he met. And so I think if there's anything I wanted to push, it was the idea that in order for us to understand one another, it has to be face-to-face and one-on-one.
Speaking on the gun violence, you did mention that it's unavoidable even to the youngest in society. Can you speak more on that?
As I said in earlier and in my author's note, it seemed kind of Pollyannish to think that we could keep the idea of guns and the danger of guns, that we didn't have to have that discussion with the kids, that they were already grappling with it. I mean, I've been saying, you know, my family and I were in New Zealand in 2020 and 21. And, you know, my kids went to public school there. And the first day that my son went to school, when they found out he was American, they would say, "Have you been in a school shooting?" And that's our reputation across the world. And we have a problem with gun violence. And so the kids are aware of it. So I don't know what the solution ultimately will turn out to be, but certainly kids need talking about it, because it's a matter of their mental health, I think, to talk about this thing that sort of is all over the place, this issue that they see all over the place.
Absolutely. It was one of the things that stuck out to me while I was reading the book about how, well, there's this 12-year-old running around with a gun, but it's so important to note that even middle schoolers, elementary schools, they know what a gun is. They know the dangers of a gun, but there's nothing that's happening in the greater world that can protect them from it. So why should we pretend like guns don't exist, that gun violence isn't happening even to children?
Yeah, I tell a story in the author's note again of, we had, when I was a kid, I grew up very much thinking that guns were toys, or that were cool. I was given, at the earliest age, I was given toy guns to play with. And yeah, I remember a friend of mine, a Korean American friend, whose dad had a gun. He and a friend were, after school, were playing. He must have been 12 or something like that. Were playing with his dad's gun, and they didn't realize it was loaded. And his friend shot it, my friend, and the bullet sailed past his ear and hit the wall behind him and left a hole. You realized how close it had been looking at the hole in the wall. So, kids, there's a lot of energy around guns, especially for boys. And I think it's critical to teach them what it does. Guns are meant to kill. That's their design. It's their function. And I think, as basic as that fact is, we lose sight of that, because it holds so much symbolic power over people. It's sometimes it's wrapped up in politics and ideas about protection, and we can lose sight of the fact that its express purpose is to kill.
Absolutely. Jordan also goes through generational trauma, in which we have a multi-generational immigrant family going through their own issues. What were you portraying here?
Well, I mean, growing up as an immigrant, there are very common issues of how to fit into larger society while, fitting into your family. And often I felt, I don't know if it's true for the younger generation, for my kids and, kids of that age right now. But when I was growing up, that generational difference was very marked. In this way, I felt as though the whole world was telling me I wasn't American, and or wasn't American enough, whatever that means, and that my family was telling me I wasn't Korean enough. And that's compounded, especially at those middle grade years, when you're apt biologically to feel strange and all these changes are going on, and you're separating from your family and trying to decide what kind of adult you'll become. So those issues all become rolled into one, and I guess it becomes a very difficult time. The reason I have there's a grandpa and a father and a son, I guess I wanted 3 generational takes on that event. And for me, the grandpa was really important to frame that event in the lineage of violence directed towards Koreans, and the father, I guess, saw it as a livelihood issue, and the boy saw it as an attack on his own dad. So I wanted, each generation had a different understanding of the events, and that was interesting to me.
Speaking personally, I saw a lot of myself and how I grew up in your book as well, so thank you for that.
Where did you grow up?
I did grow up in San Francisco, but still the generational differences between just my own parents and myself was still reflected in the book.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Thank you for saying that.
Of course. Thank you for writing the book. There was so much of myself that I saw in this book. I cried a lot.
Oh, you did? Oh, no. Do you feel you're a Jordan or a Sarah or a Mike?
I felt like I was the older sister. I do have a younger brother as well.
Yeah.
The perfect older sister that has a lot of expectations for her, but still ends up, not fitting into the mold. but even though I'm not Korean, there was still a lot of representation for me in here. And I hope that other people who do get to read it will find themselves in here too.
I'm so gratified to hear you say that. I'm just, thank you very much.
Jordan also encounters a variety of people on his journey. What was the purpose for these characters?
Well, one, I just tried to be logical about. So this is just a lot of it's just plot stuff. He lives in a suburb of Los Angeles and has to get across town, and he's 12, so he can't drive. So I knew he couldn't do it by himself. So we had to have some characters. We had to have people he encountered along the way. And I think I was really thinking about Huck Finn when I was initially conceiving the book, like, you know, going down the river, the Mississippi River, and meeting, running into people along the way. And that's the book that I had in mind. And maybe I had a little bit of a Harold and Kumar road trip in mind too. But so we had to have him meet people, and so we just tried to be logical about who it was, and I kind of wanted to get some ideas, put some ideas about that I had about the event in question into the mouths of characters he would meet, and so I was just trying to be logical about it, and so those are the characters we came up with. But I didn't want to crowd it too much. I sort of wanted to give it space again, because I didn't want a crowd of people. I wanted him to have individual encounters.
So your children, have they read the book? What were their thoughts?
Yeah, they have read the book. They liked the book. They gave me a thumbs up. I did. I've been saying I caught my daughter. I came into her room and she was rereading it. So that was a good sign. So I hope it's something that we can talk about, you know, as they get older.
It's absolutely a good place to start. We need to open discussions about these heavier topics.
Yeah.
What was your expectations for readers to walk away with after reading the book?
Well, as I alluded to earlier, the biggest thing was just to paint a portrait of a Korean American family that people might empathize with. And, you know, especially living in Los Angeles, we just walk by people. It's a driving town, or we drive by people. We just see, we don't give a second thought to who those people might be because we're so insular. And I think that insularity is probably magnified by the fact that we're living more and more of our lives online. So I just wanted to paint a picture of a family that felt very close to mine, you know, that felt like mine, and felt like a lot of families that I knew growing up. And if that's the only thing that people walk away with, great. You know, that's baseline for me. And then the other thing that I've been experiencing that I'm so gratified for is the book has been a remarkable way for me to have conversations with strangers like you about these topics that are very meaningful to me. And it's just been a great springboard to have discussions about these issues that I've been thinking about all these years and continue to think about, that are really in my life, that are very close to my heart. So that's been maybe the most gratifying thing. And so I guess to finally answer your question, maybe what I'd really like is to encourage those discussions amongst readers. About culture, about families, you know.
Your new book, Troublemaker, came out in March. Can you tease a sentence from the book?
The sentence that I think about is a sentence that Jordan says, to his father, I think. He says, I want to be the one to decide who I am. And it does feel like, in the book, I think it's more of a cultural statement. Like, I want to just, whatever I end up being culturally, I want to be the one who dictates that. But it also feels like a really kind of middle grade statement of purpose, that there's so many influences in your life, and you don't know who you should follow, be it your friends, be it school, church, parents. And so I guess I felt like that. I felt like there's so many people pulling at my t-shirt, and I guess I wanted to say, I want to call the shots on this, on me, And so that I guess that's the sentence that comes to mind.
I think that's a powerful sentence. Do you have any upcoming works?
Oh, I have a movie coming out this year called "Don't Make Me Go," and that'll be on Amazon. And it's about a dad who finds out that he has a tumor, and a single dad. And so he, instead of telling his daughter about the tumor, he keeps it a secret and decides that he's going to take his daughter on a road trip to meet her mother so that she won't be alone. So that's the next thing coming out.
Okay, excited to see it. And where can we find you on social media?
I'm on Instagram and Twitter, and my handle is John the Cho.
Thank you so much for being here with us, John.
I'm also on TikTok, and my handle is The Real Shaquille O'Neal.
Oh my God. Where can we find your book for purchase?
Everywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, what have you. There's also an audio book, if you're interested in that I recorded. And yeah, so anywhere, independent bookstores, it's pretty much everywhere.
You did the audiobook yourself?
Yes, I did.
Awesome. I need to go check that out then.
Yeah. Spend some time with me in your headphones.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here with us, John. I hope that our readers will pick up the book and open a discussion with other people around them.
Me too. That would be great. Thanks so much.
My guest today has been author John Cho with his book, Troublemaker, available for purchase wherever books are sold. You can find us with more conversations with authors at 24hourkpop.com. I'm Gemma for the Kpop-TV Entertainment Network, and I'll see you next time.